Remember last week we went over the early American history from 1750 to 1776. A lot of things going on. We had the French Indian War. French Indian War just happened to be, we considered a singular event, but it wasn't. The French Indian War was the North American theater of the first 7-year World War. So the French Indian War just happened to be the North American theater for Britain. And they sent troops to the colonies to help in that war, so that they could, so that the colonists could help defend against the French and the Indians. When that war was over, England suffered quite a financial distress putting on that 7-year World War. There was shortages, there was lack of work, the inflation was high, the money supply was low, and the people, because remember, in England at that time, it was probably the most complex government in Europe still to this point. It was a constitutional monarchy at this point, right? And the people were screaming to the House of Commons and the House of Lords and to the King that something needed to be done. They were suffering economically. And every time the people suffer economically, they always scream at their government, don't they? It was no different then. They were screaming at their government, let's do something about this. The king was worried about looking weak, and so they used the colonies, that North American theater, as the scapegoat for the reason why England was hurting for money. And so they decided what they would do is, by golly, they were going to have those colonists pay for all the troops and everything that the people of England had to supply to their British brethren in the colonies. But every time they put this tax down, the people pushed back, and the king eventually would have to pull the tax. And instead of looking strong and taking care of the economic hardships in England, he was starting to look weak. After the French and Indian War, there was quite a few troops that were still in the colonies, and the people were starting to feel a little bit pressured by the British Crown, because they didn't have this many redcoats in there before. And so as things started to get bad in America, they started to wonder, why are these troops still here? It's no different than what we would be wondering today, right? It was a force to come free us, and now is it an occupying force after it was a force to free us? So they started to question why these forces were still there. As things started to heat up, getting towards March of 1775, there was a whole fleet of ships that were coming to the eastern shore of the colonies. It was at this time that you had Tories and Whigs, and the Tories were kind of Casper milquetoast about the whole thing, right? Well, let's keep petitioning the king and see if the king will reconsider. Let's see if the House of Commons will actually at some point in time stick up for us, right? And they had some hope. The House of Commons changed over in England, and there was a speaker that was a little bit more amenable to the colonies, and that's part of the foetus that flamed these Tories in the United States, in the colonies, going, well, let's just give them one more chance. Let's all, we're going to join arms at some point in time. We're all going to sing Kumbaya. Patric Henry didn't have that sentiment. And so at St. John's Church, and that's what we're on, is the give me liberty or give me death speech. Well, it just stopped on me again, so we're going to get that. We'll do it the old-fashioned way again. And so this is his speech. Now, you've probably heard parts of his speech before, but it's really important to understand the whole thing, especially after this history that we've learned and these other documents that we've read. You're gonna notice some things being echoed in Patrick Henry's speech. To avoid interference from Governor Dunmore, the Second Virginia Convention met March 20th, 1775. Now, what happened almost a month to the day later? That was the battle. There's the shot heard around the world. That was the battle at Concord. Okay. So to avoid interference from Governor Dunmore, the Second Virginia Convention met March 20th, 1775, inland at Richmond, in what is now called St. John's Church, instead of the capital of Williamsburg. Delegate Patrick Henry presented resolutions to raise and establish a militia and to put Virginia in a posture of defense. Henry's opponents urged caution and patience until the Crown replied to Congress's latest petition for reconciliation. On the 23rd, Henry presented a proposal to organize a volunteer company of cavalry or infantry in every Virginia county. By custom, Henry addressed himself to the convention's president, Peyton Randolph of Williamsburg. Henry's words were not transcribed, but no one who heard them forgot their eloquence or Henry's closing words. St. John's Church, Richmond, Virginia, March 23rd, 1775. Mr. President, no man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as abilities of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights, and therefore I hope it will not be thought disrespectful to those gentlemen if, entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, I shall speak forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before the House is one of awful moment to this country. For my own part, I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery, and in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we hold to God and our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time, through fear of giving offense, I should consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country and of an act of disloyalty toward the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. Let's think about today. Why do you think it's so important to chill the speech? Why do you think it's so important to chill the First Amendment? Our founding fathers understood that that's important. And that's because sometimes you have to risk offending others to find the truth and to bring the whole debate out. It doesn't mean that we have to be uncivil, but it means that free speech needs to be open. It's not popular speech that needs to be protected, does it? It's unpopular speech. And you're going to find that Patrick Henry's speech was on the unpopular side. He was talking war. He was talking taking up arms. That didn't set real well with a lot of the people, especially the Tories and those that were praying that the king would somehow change his attitude and welcome them with open arms again, right? Mr. President, it is natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to the song of that siren till she transforms us into beasts. Is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we deposed to be of the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not, the things which so nearly concern their temporal salvation? For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it. Don't we have that same problem today? That sounds terrible. I don't want to hear that. That hurts my feelings. I don't want to hear that. Well, isn't it better to know the whole truth, no matter how distasteful or disdainful it is, and to be able to prepare for the worst and hope for the best? It's all right to have hope for the best, but if you're not prepared for the worst, you're living in a fairy tale. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging of the future, but by the past. And judging by the past, I wish to know what there has been in the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify those hopes with which gentlemen have been pleased to solace themselves and the House. Is that insidious smile with which our petition has been lately received? Trust it not, sir. It will prove a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with these warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Our fleets and armies necessary to work of, Are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. So what he's saying is, you're all hoping that the king comes with these loving arms, but we've got an entire fleet that's darkening our shores. They didn't bring an army to hug us. They brought an army to subjugate us and to put us into slavery. I ask, gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array? If its purpose be not to force us to submission, can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all this accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They are sent over to bind and rivet upon us those chains which the British ministry have been so long forging. And what have we to oppose them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer upon the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up in every light of which it is capable, but it has been all in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? What terms shall we find which have not been already exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves. Sir, we have done everything that could be done to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne and have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the ministry and parliament. Our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. In vain, after these things, may we indulge the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. There is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve inviolate those inestimable privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must fight. I repeat it, sir, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be the next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and when a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength by irresolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies shall have bound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak if we make a proper use of those means which the God of nature hath placed in our power. 3 millions of people armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country as that which we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. Think about that. Think about what he's talking about there. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with such formidable an adversary. Right? I've heard nothing but for the last 2 years, can't fight City Hall, John. You just can't fight City Hall. It's no use. Right? Even Biden said, what are guns going to do? You don't have F-15s and nuclear bombs. Get out of here. This is why the people need to be armed. This is why it's we the people. I don't need an F-15. I don't need a nuclear weapon to oppose tyranny. All I need is my fellow patriots and myself. And I don't have to oppose with arms. I can oppose with lots of different things. I can oppose with my voice. I can oppose with my presence. These are the things that give us the ability that the Declaration of Independence said that we have the right to alter or abolish. And too many times people think that alter and abolish means right to arms in warfare, and it doesn't. That's the absolute last step. There's so many things that we can do to alter and abolish, and a lot of it just has to do with showing up. 90% of keeping your republic is showing up. Only 10% of it's speaking up. But how many people won't even practice that 10% to speak up and are too busy to show up? There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations and who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. What I was just saying. Besides, sir, we have no election. If we were base enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. Their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat it, sir, let it come. It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. And this is the citation of where this comes from. Now, it's a short speech, but it gives me chills every time. There's so much in that speech, not just the phrase, give me liberty or give me death. There's so much in there. There's so much truth in there. What does it say in the Declaration of Independence? All experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer evils while evils are sufferable. rather than to right themselves and abolish the forms to which they've become accustomed? Have we become accustomed to subjugation? Have we become accustomed to having our speech chilled? Have we become accustomed to tyranny, that it's okay? At what point will it be no longer sufferable? At what point? Do we want to wait until we hear the chains of slavery and the clash of swords of war? Is that what we want to wait for? Is that when it becomes no longer sufferable? Or should we get involved much sooner? It's impossible to assert your rights and to stand for them if you don't know what they are. It's impossible to hold your elected officials to the Constitution if you have no clue what the principles behind it are. How many people in this room believe that your elected officials have read the Constitution, understand the Constitution, and believe in its principles? How many of you? That's what I thought. Not one hand went up. Not one. But yet, every 2 years, every 4 years, we go and vote, and the same people get voted in. Same people, every time. And why? Because we allow all this corporate money to pour in. These same people, governments are created, corporations are born of government, right? Go back to your page in your packet of self-evident truths. Man is born of God, operates under the pleasure of God, and because of such, he has rights that are inherited. And those rights are protected, not granted, but protected by the Constitution and the common law. Corporations are born of government. They operate under the pleasure of government. And thereby they are granted privileges, not rights, but privileges. And those privileges are protected by statutes and the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC. Whose job is it to control me, the flesh and blood human man? God's. That's God's, because I operate under his pleasure. I operate under his natural law. Whose job is it to control corporations? Government. So do you understand why your elected officials don't control that which gives them the money to be in power? Do you understand? It's tough to find somebody that's actually going to go up there and stand. It's even tougher to hold their feet to the fire. Everybody understands that Madison is known as the father of the Constitution, correct? Even Madison, after becoming president, violated the Constitution, didn't he? Jefferson violated the Constitution. See, we can't hold these founding fathers as deity. They were not gods. They were flesh and blood human beings just like us, with all the same faults, but they were divinely inspired. Each human being has the propensity for good and evil in them. We all do. In fact, some very good human beings commit some of the greatest atrocities with the best of intentions without realizing that they're committing the atrocities. They do it for the best of intentions. But what do we know about hell? The road there's paved with the best of intentions, isn't it? So even good people can do bad things. What does it say in the Bible? It says that there's wisdom in the counsel of many. Now, whether you believe in the Bible or not, that's a true principle. There's wisdom in the counsel of many. And that's why we, the people, are that counsel of many. And our job, when we hire these elected officials, when they go and serve us, the people, I don't care if they're your brother. If power corrupts them and they do something with the best of intentions, without any intention of being evil, but it is, it's your job, it's we the people's job, to use the tool of shame for them to be in good behavior. We're supposed to shame them into good behavior. How do you raise your children? If they're bad, do you just go, "No, Johnny, you shouldn't have done that"? If you did, you're going to get what some of the problems are today, right? Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody's entitled. That's what you're going to get. When I grew up, we didn't have ADHD. We had a leather belt. And it got our attention focused pretty quick. You raise children to do the right thing and have good behavior using the tool of shame. Now, that's not the only tool we use, and it shouldn't be. Because if that's the only tool you use on children to have good behavior, you're not going to have well-balanced children, are you? Because it takes praise too. When they do the things that they're supposed to do, we're supposed to tell them, "Good job." But when they don't do the things that they're supposed to do, how do we change that behavior? We make them feel ashamed for what they did, so that that behavior doesn't become habit, right? How do you keep your elected officials in good behavior? The same way? See, this is why carpetbaggers aren't good. People that move from one area into another to run for office doesn't work, does it? Because they have no roots in the area. They might not even understand the customs. What do we learn from the past history, right? William the Conqueror slaughtered all the people that came out to praise him as the new king because he thought it was an insurrection, because he simply didn't understand the culture. Right? So if you get somebody from somewhere else that comes in, they may not understand the culture. That's a big problem, isn't it? Especially when they're there to represent you. This is why we don't like carpetbaggers. They don't have family in the area. They don't understand the culture. They don't have long-standing roots in the area. It doesn't matter what they do, right? They can destroy it and move on to the next place. And you can't use the tool of shame when they're exhibiting bad behavior. Now think about it. If they're the third generation in an area, they've got cousins, they've got aunts and uncles, they've got parents and grandparents, they've got siblings. You may not go to church with that representative, but you may go to church with his brother. And if you're shaming his brother because of what his brother's doing, what do you think's going to happen at that Thanksgiving dinner? Hey, bud, you're making it a little uncomfortable here, supporting CRT. You're making it a little uncomfortable for us because you didn't vote against certain things. This is how you keep your elected officials in good behavior. No different than raising children, right? And isn't that odd in this country? We're so regulated. You got to have a license to drive a car, a license to own a dog, but any two fools can have a kid. That's a little scary, isn't it? Just like just about any fool can vote for anybody running for office. That's also scary. So if you're going to keep your republic, 90% of it's showing up, 10% of it's speaking up, and you've got to wait. You can't wait until evils are sufferable before you get involved. We're at the point where there is nothing much more that's sufferable. We have to stand, we have to be counted. We the people are the only hope that we the people have. We can sit around no more and hope. I had somebody the other day call and said, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter because the military's going to move in and they're going to take over the government and they're going to have the..." I said, "You're an idiot. You're an idiot." They said, "Well, the military took an oath to the Constitution. By gum, they ought to hold to their oath. And I said, do you hear yourself? Yeah, they did take an oath to the Constitution. For them to overtake the government violates the very oath you want them to uphold.